They came from my grandfather's boat at dawn with bolt cutters, a sheriff's deputy, and the kind of confidence people only have when they think the law belongs to them. What they didn't know, what Karen Brightwater definitely didn't know, was that the water slapping against my dock that morning legally belonged to me. And nothing wakes a man up faster than watching somebody try to steal his family's history before sunrise. It was a Tuesday, a little after 6, the kind of mountain morning where the mist hangs low over Lake Meridian like a ghost that hasn't decided whether to stay or leave. I was standing in my kitchen with a coffee mug in one hand, watching through the window as Karen marched down toward my dock in a pressed white jacket, waving papers around like she was leading a raid. Behind her were 2 HOA board members I recognized from their expensive sunglasses and cheap courage, plus a deputy who looked like he already regretted getting out of bed. At the end of that dock sat my grandfather's boat, a 1985 cabin cruiser named Persistence. The old cedar planks groaned under their feet as they came closer, and that sound hit me harder than the sight of Karen herself. My grandfather built that dock with his own hands. Every board, every bolt, every post sunk into that lake bed with a sledgehammer sweat and the kind of stubbornness that built half the West. Karen stopped near the stern and held up a notice like it was scripture. 72 hours, she called out loud enough for the lake to hear. Remove this eyesore or face $500 a day in fines. That woman had been in Lake Meridian for 3 years and acted like she'd invented shoreline living. Karen came out from Denver in a black BMW wearing lavender perfume so strong it could stun wildlife, and immediately decided our quiet little community needed standards. By standards, she meant newer docks, shinier boats, richer neighbors, fewer families with history, and no reminders that this place existed before she discovered it in a real estate brochure. My name's Marcus Wendell. I'm 52, a retired Navy engineer, and for reasons Karen never fully understood, I was the one man in that community she absolutely could not bully. My grandfather, Clifford, bought that so-called worthless swampland in 1982 for $8,000. People laughed at him back then, said the soil was bad, the mosquitoes were biblical, and nobody in their right mind would want to build out there. But Clifford saw what other people missed, a clean southern basin, good fishing, water privacy, and something more valuable than all of it put together, control. By the time Karen arrived, Lake Meridian had 47 homes around it. Some were original families, folks who'd been there for decades. Others were newer residents, the kind who liked rustic charm as long as it came with granite countertops and a dock that looked good in drone footage. Karen gathered those people fast. She formed an HOA, filled it with transplants who thought community improvement meant squeezing out anyone who made the place feel too real, and started sending violation letters like Christmas cards from hell. The Hendersons got hit for their vegetable garden. The Torinos got warned about a tire swing. Me, I got targeted over the boat. But it was never really about the boat. That old cruiser carried my grandfather's tackle boxes, his oil-stained gloves, his coffee thermos, and the smell of diesel and lake water that still brought him back every time I stepped inside. Karen looked at it and saw a nuisance. I looked at it and saw my family. A week after our first fight in my driveway, she called an emergency HOA meeting on a Thursday night, timed just right so working folks couldn't make it, but her retired allies could. She stood up front with a PowerPoint presentation and that brittle smile people wear when they think paperwork makes them royalty. She proposed annual boat inspections, visual compatibility rules, restoration mandates for anything older than 20 years, and a $2,000 watercraft assessment just for the privilege of keeping a boat on community waters. Community waters. That phrase stuck in my head. While she was busy dressing up theft in polite legal language, I was down at the Jefferson County Courthouse, digging through old property records, survey maps, and incorporation documents. Navy teaches you something useful about conflict if you want to win. Don't start by yelling. Start by learning what the other side doesn't know. What Karen didn't know was beautiful. First, her HOA paperwork was weak, missing signatures, bad formation, not enough approval from original homeowners. But that wasn't even the good part. The good part came after the meeting when somebody slipped a note under my windshield wiper. Check the lake deed. Not everything is what it seems. No name, just that. For 3 days, I carried that note in my pocket like it was a lit match. Then I drove to the state archives in Denver, where the building smelled like dust coffee and old government regret. A clerk with taped glasses brought me original surveys from 1981, and somewhere in those thick yellowing folders, my whole understanding of that lake cracked open. Lake Meridian wasn't one lake, not legally. It was two bodies of water divided by an underwater ridge that only showed up on the old topographic maps, Lake Meridian North, where most of the fancy homes sat, and Lake Meridian South, the quiet, pristine section behind my property. And according to the deed in my shaking hands, my grandfather hadn't bought a lot on the lake. He'd bought the whole damn southern lake. Water rights, lake bed, access easements, mineral rights, recreational use, the works. I sat there in that archive room with dust in my nose and my heart pounding like I was 20 again because all at once Karen's obsession made sense. She wasn't trying to make the neighborhood prettier. She was trying to erase the one piece of evidence that proved the old families still had rights she couldn't control. Once I knew what I had, everything changed. Karen, meanwhile, got worse. She hired private security to patrol the water in matching polos and mirrored sunglasses circling my dock in a speedboat that leaked fuel into a lake they didn't even own. Orange warning signs started appearing around the community. No unauthorized watercraft, like she thought bold letters could overwrite property law. Then came the whisper campaign. Suddenly, I was unstable, aggressive, a troubled veteran. She filed harassment complaints and tried to paint me as some dangerous man one bad day away from snapping. It was slick, nasty work because if you can't beat a person legally, you make people afraid of him socially. Then she had me served with a restraining order during my nephew's birthday barbecue. Picture it, kids running through the yard, burgers smoking on the grill, my niece holding a paper plate bigger than her face, and some embarrassed process server walking up my driveway with court papers, while 12 family members stood there in stunned silence. That was the moment the whole thing stopped being personal annoyance and turned into war. So I did what I should have done sooner. I got a lawyer through the Veterans Legal Aid Program. Rebecca Martinez, sharp, calm, and mean in exactly the right ways. She reviewed the deed, the survey, Karen's complaints, the HOA documents, and she leaned back in her chair and said the words I'll never forget. Marcus, she's not just trying to move your boat, she's trying to clear title for development. A background check proved it. Karen wasn't just some nosy HOA president. She was tied to a development company called Mountain Vista Properties. She already had quiet purchase deals lined up on several homes. Investors, plans, marina sketches, condo concepts, private yacht club nonsense, the whole thing. And then came the twist that made me laugh out loud in Rebecca's office. My grandfather's deed included a perpetual easement across what was now the main access road to Karen's planned marina site. So not only did I own the lake she wanted, I controlled the legal road her whole future project would need to cross. That old carpenter everybody underestimated had laid a trap 40 years earlier without even knowing it. From there, we stopped reacting and started building. Every incident got documented. Every rumor, every threatening call, every patrol boat circling my dock, every fake fine. I had timestamps, photos, recordings, fuel contamination tests, GPS coordinates, repair invoices, witness statements. Karen kept escalating, and every time she did, she handed us another brick. Then she made the mistake that really killed her. She approached my neighbor, Ezra Blackstone, 78 years old, retired school teacher, spine made of oak, offered him $200,000 cash for a cabin worth maybe 70 on paper. Ezra smiled, took the coffee she brought, listened to her lie through her expensive teeth, and then came straight to me. That woman, he said, sitting at my kitchen table, isn't buying property. She's buying silence. Ezra rallied the original families. Deputy Jim Torino quietly shared records showing Karen's pattern of false complaints. Rebecca brought in an environmental law clinic from the University of Colorado. The students dug into state and federal databases like terriers after rats. What they found was almost too perfect. Lake Meridian South. My lake sat under a conservation easement tied to wildlife protection. Cutthroat trout habitat. Restricted development. Then an archaeological review turned up evidence of an old Ute fishing camp on the lake bed, which brought in historic preservation laws on top of the environmental ones. Karen wasn't trying to build a marina on annoying old family property. She was trying to build one on protected land, protected water, and potentially protected cultural ground, all while harassing veterans and fixed-income homeowners to force quick sales. That's the thing greed does, it makes people stupid in layers. The closer Labor Day got, the more desperate she became. Somebody sugared my boat's fuel tank. My mailbox got smashed 3 times. Anonymous calls hit the VA claiming I was unstable. Cars blocked my driveway. My truck got flyers taped all over it in the middle of the night. Then one morning, my infrared cameras caught Karen and two board members dumping motor oil near my dock at 3 in the morning, dressed in dark clothes like suburban criminals in a community theater version of a felony. I sent that footage everywhere, my lawyer, the EPA, the sheriff, Jim Torino. And still, Karen kept going. Because by then, people like Karen don't know how to stop. They only know how to double down. Karen scheduled one final community meeting on Labor Day weekend. Final vote. Final presentation. Final push to brand me the environmental threat and force my boat out for good. She thought she was walking into her victory. She walked into her funeral. That night, the community center was packed beyond reason. Residents, reporters, cameras, legal observers, and a few federal faces standing quietly in the back like men who already knew how this ended. The room smelled like wet jackets, coffee, cheap folding chairs, and nerves. Karen got up front in a navy blazer and started her slideshow voice, all polished confidence. Tonight, she said, we protect our lake from dangerous elements. Then she clicked to a photo of my grandfather's boat with fake oil stains edited into the water. That was my cue. I stood up, walked to the front, and asked one question. Miss Brightwater, before we vote, can you explain your legal authority over my property? She blinked annoyed, then smiled that thin little smile. The HOA has full authority over community waters, Mr. Wendell. Actually, I said plugging in my laptop, you don't. The projector changed. Her fake evidence disappeared. Up came my grandfather's original deed, then the survey maps, then the easement documentation, then the conservation filings. The room got so quiet you could hear a chair creak in the back. I explained it all slowly, clearly, no drama needed because truth does its own heavy lifting. Lake Meridian South belonged to my family. Her proposed marina crossed my property. Her access road crossed my easement. Her patrol boats were trespassing. Her signs were unlawful. Her development scheme was dead before it started. And then Karen did exactly what guilty people do when truth corners them. She lost her mind. She shouted that the documents were fake, that I was part of some conspiracy, that this whole town had turned against progress. Her voice climbed higher and thinner until it sounded like something tearing. That was when Deputy Jim Torino stepped forward. Karen Brightwater. He said, calm as church bells, you are under arrest for attempted bribery, fraud, environmental violations, and conspiracy. The handcuffs clicked shut, and I swear to God it was one of the most satisfying sounds I've ever heard. Then the rest came fast. An EPA investigator announced the active environmental case. Federal agents served warrants tied to her development company. Her assistant, a young woman named Sarah, who'd been quietly documenting everything, came forward with recordings, emails, and evidence that Karen had planned the harassment campaign from the start. Investors ran. Board members resigned. Her lawyer disappeared. The whole shiny machine she'd built out of pressure, lies, and borrowed authority collapsed in one public glorious heap. Before the meeting ended, I made one last announcement. I said I'd grant legitimate lake access easements to actual residents for $1, and I was creating the Clifford Wendell Memorial Wildlife Preserve to protect the South Lake permanently. People stood up. Then more people stood up. Then the whole room was clapping while Karen, red-faced and raging in cuffs, got walked past cameras and neighbors and every person she'd tried to scare into submission. That was the part she never understood. Power borrowed from fear vanishes. The second fear breaks. 6 months later, I was back on my grandfather's dock at sunrise, the lake quiet again, the air clean, the water gold under the first light. Karen took a plea deal on federal charges. Her license was gone. Her company went bankrupt. The lawsuit settled. The new HOA got rebuilt under rules that actually respected law, transparency, and human decency. My grandfather's boat got restored, not removed. And somewhere in all of it, I learned something that hit me harder than the victory did. A lot of people think evil looks dramatic, like shouting violence monsters you can spot across the room. Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it shows up in a blazer with a smile talking about standards, improvements, and what's best for everyone. It speaks politely while reaching into your life with both hands. It counts on decent people getting tired, getting intimidated, or deciding peace is cheaper than principle. Sometimes it is cheaper, but the bill comes due later and everybody pays. My grandfather didn't leave me a fortune. He left me something better, proof that quiet people who build carefully can outlast loud people who grab recklessly. Karen wanted to turn memory into inventory. She wanted to turn a lake into a brochure. In the end, the thing that destroyed her wasn't my anger. It was the truth documented all the way down. So here's my question. When somebody abuses power in the name of community, where do you think the line is between following the rules and fighting back hard enough to stop them? And tell me honestly, if this had happened to your family, Would you have taken the settlement and walked away? Or would you have done exactly what I did and burned the whole scheme down in public? Drop your take in the comments. Who was right, who was wrong, and whether you've ever had to stand your ground against someone who thought money and paperwork made them untouchable.